Hello and welcome back. Now let's try to use all what we've learned into this example. So right now I have this map called map tutorial that we made earlier. And this is just a simple map that I made, called it map tutorial, and this is it. Nothing is inside this map, so it's all empty. So what we want to do is firstly enter the level blueprint. So up here in blueprint, open the level blueprint. And right now it's empty and I actually want to delete these for now. So it's fully clean and it's fully empty. So to begin with, we want to what I want to do for this example is I want to make three planes, so three different grounds, and these planes will race against each other until they reach a goal, and one of them will win when it reaches the goal. So it's some kind of a race, and you have to click the button to race with the plane. Okay, so very simple game. It's not the next Counter-Strike, but I mean it's a start. Okay, so let's start, and what we can start with is add the events, or we can actually just add the planes first. I think that will make more sense. So let's create three shapes. We will create a plane, or we will create a cube or a sphere. Let's create a sphere actually. That's more cool than a plane. Create three spheres, and we have one here, we have one here, and we have one here. Okay. And by the way, if you want to duplicate, you have to hold Alt while you drag. This is how you duplicate. Okay, so now we have three planes, and we can increase the shape of them or we can let them be. That's up to you, but maybe it doesn't really matter for this. It's not a competitive game. We can make this size 2 or 1.5. Also, a trick to not change all three numbers, we can just click on this lock, and this way we can just change one number and it will change all three. Okay, I'll just put these spheres above the ground. Okay, so it doesn't matter too much. Now we have three different spheres. So what I want to do now is click on the first sphere and give it a name. So I will call it small sphere. Click on the next, call it medium sphere. And click on the last one and call it large sphere. It's always nice to give them names because in programming you need to know which is which. Okay? So now I have these three different spheres, and what we want to do is we want to add a trigger box. So if you go to create, you have something called a box trigger. And if you press G, so you can see all the icons. So this is a box trigger, and what this means is we can actually make an event or something happens when you overlap this trigger box. So I'm going to scale it up, pressing R to go to the scale tool and just scaling it up. You can also scale it up here if you want in this details panel, but it doesn't matter, it's up to you. I'm just scaling it this way and placing it in the middle so it's like a goal line. Okay, so now we have a goal, and make it a bit larger so it covers everything. Okay, so now we have this, and these three spheres will race against each other, and one of them will win if they reach the goal faster. Okay, so let's save everything. Now this is our simple level. Let's go over to blueprints and create the game. So open the level blueprint, and here we want to race with three buttons. So we want to control this sphere with the E button, we want to control this one with the R button on the keyboard, and we want to control this one with the T button. And let's go back. So these are actual events. So if you click E here and maybe write key, if you don't find it, just go up, and this is the E key. So this is an event for when the E key is pressed or released. So click on it. You can see here this is actually an event because this is a red node. This means it's an event. And let's find the R key, and let's find the T key. Okay, So now we have the E key, R key, and T key. So these are events. So if we click the E key on the keyboard, what happens? And if we click the R, what happens? So what we want to happen is we want to move these spheres, okay? All right, so let's actually do this. Let's make them move. So over here, we want to get a reference to the sphere to begin with the E key. We want to move this sphere. So I'm clicking on this sphere and then I go back here and right click and click on create a reference to small sphere. Now that we have a reference to the small sphere, we want to set the actor location. So if you just write location to find the correct node, you can see here we have something called set actor location that we have used previously. Okay, so when you press E, you want to set a new location for this. So what should the location be? We can't really make it static, because if we make it static, like if we press E now, let me make it 50 or something like this, compile and clicking play. So if I go here and I click E, you see nothing happens. This is actually because it says to you, this mesh has to be movable, else you can't move it in game. So click on the meshes and click on movable, movable and movable. And let's try again. Let's save everything and let's play again. So when you click E now, you will move it 50. If you click E again, nothing happens because this is actually a static number. You're just moving it to this location. You're not moving it every time you press E. So what we want to do is we want to get the current location of the sphere. We want to add a certain number to it, and then we want to set the location by this number. So let's try to create it. Maybe it will get more explanatory when you see it. So to begin with, let's disconnect this. And for the sphere, let's write get actor location. An easier way, if you don't know what it's called, just write location and you will see the get actor location. Okay, so now we have the location of this actor, which is over here. So what do we want to do with this location? We want to move it along the x-axis, because you can see here on the pivot point, this way is actually the x-axis. The red pivot point, you can see it here. It's the x. So we want to move it along the x-axis this way. So what we want to do, we want to go back here and we want to move it toward the x-axis. So we want to plus the x-axis. We want to change the value. So this one is a vector, and remember, a vector contains three numbers, this x, y, and z. But what we want only to edit the z value, and we can do this by dragging out here and writing break vector. So now we're breaking the vector into the x, y, and z, and we only want to change the x. So for example, plus, and actually I think it's negative because, whoops, now I minimized it. I think it's negative because we're going this way, not this way. This is plus, this is minus. So let's just go back and write minus 10. Maybe we should just have written subtract 10. Let's try this. Okay. And now we want to make the vector. We don't want to change the y and z values, so these should stay the same. So now here you can make a vector. So make vector. Okay, so now make vector. This is correct. This is plugged into the x, and the y and z should stay the same. So by doing this, we actually broke the vector. We edited the x value, and then we made the vector again. So now I have the vector again, but this time we actually changed the x value. So what I want to do with this is every time you press the E, you want to subtract 10 from the x. So this way you move it by 10 every time you press E. So now this new location is this. I'm going to set the actor location. So now before we click play, remember to add this small sphere to the target. And you can actually double click on this this line, and this will create this node here, which is a connection pin, and you can move this around, and this is a good way to organize your code. So this is pretty cool, and I use this to organize the code, and now it should actually work. So if you compile and click save everything and click play, you can see here if you click E, you are moving by 10 every time. If I keep clicking E, I move by 10 every time. So this is pretty cool. And maybe we can move it a bit more. This is very slow. Maybe you can move it by 20 instead. All right, so this is working. And the next thing I want to do is I want to print a text on the screen to show me how many steps I have taken. And this is just simple, like we did before. We can just use a print string. And let's see what we do. We can actually make a custom event. So let's make a custom event, and this event we can call add steps. Okay, and we need a variable for this, something to store our amount of steps. So make a new variable, let's call it steps taken. And over here we change it to integer because it's a number without decimals. If it was with decimals, we would have chosen float. But this is a number without decimals. This is why you choose integer. Hold Control and drag it out to get it here. And we want to add one step every time you press E. So just write plus plus, because plus plus is adding 1 to the specified value, then it set it automatically. Okay, and we want to print this value. So print string and connect this. So now it's going to print every time we press E. Okay, so remember this event is not going to work currently because we haven't really told the game when to call this event. So remember, every time you press E, you want to add one step. So over here, write the name of the event. So over here, click on add steps, or write add steps to call this event. So now every time we press E, we are going to move the sphere and also call this event to add one steps to our variable. Okay, so now we can compile and click play. You can click on E and you can see here it's actually moving, and it's also printing on the screen how many steps we have taken. Okay, so now that these steps are working, let's make something for fun. For example, if you take 25 steps, the game will tell you you should probably stop playing the game and start developing more, because else you won't be finished with the game. So for example, here in the steps taken, let's write equal, and maybe I did it too fast. I'll do it a bit slower. So write the equal sign, choose the equal. And over here, you can double click, make a pin to make it more organized. You can actually mark these two and click on Q to make a straight line. And you can drag out of this and click B to create a branch and connect it. Okay, so now you're saying, is the steps taken equal to, let's say, 25? If this is true, then the game will do something, and if it's false, it will do something else. So in this case, if the steps are not 25, we won't do anything. If the steps are 25, we will print a string saying stop playing and start developing the game. Okay. So it will say that you should probably stop playing the game and do some work instead. Let's compile and save, and now it works. We can test it later, but this should probably work. So if I go back, and now we want this goal to work. So in order to make it work like we want, if this sphere hits this goal, we want it to print out that this small sphere has 1, or this medium sphere has 1, and so on. So what we want to do is click on this trigger box, and while we have clicked this, let's go back to our event graph in the level blueprint, and let's right click, go under events, go under collision, and then click on the add on actor begin overlap. So this is the actor begin overlap event. So what happens when this trigger box is overlapped? And we want to print a message saying that this sphere has 1. And what sphere has 1? We want to get the name of the sphere. And this is actually the other actor. This is the actor uh, that is colliding with this trigger box. So we want to get the name of it, and you can just write name, and you will see something called this get display name. So get display name is actually this name up here. This is the display name. So we want to get the display name, and let's try to hook it up and see what happens. So we want to just display the name for now. If you click play and you click E, you can see nothing happens. And why is that? This is because you have to click on the sphere, and down here under collision, there is something called generate overlap events. If you don't have this ticked, you can't do any overlap events. So tick this sphere that it is able to do overlap events, and save it. Try to click play and click E, and you can see here to the top left that it says small sphere, and this is correct. Okay, so let's make it more interesting. Instead of only saying small sphere, we just want to print a message instead. So let's make a new variable, make a new text variable and call it WinMessage, and choose the variable type as text. So now we have this WinMessage. Let's compile. And for this WinMessage, let's say now we can't write small sphere because this will be static text. What if the medium sphere one? So for this to be dynamic, you actually have to use curly brackets. So curly bracket, and it doesn't matter what you write inside of this curly bracket. And inside of here, you can just write, for example, I will show you and then curly bracket start, you write something inside of the curly bracket, and then you end it, and then you continue your sentence. For example, like this. For example, the small sphere has 1, or the medium sphere has 1. Now to fill this curly bracket space, you can drag this out. So this is the WinMessage, and we have to use something called format text. So what format text is, we can actually format this curly bracket into some text that we add dynamically. So if you add this WinMessage to the format text, you can add a pin here, and you can see there's a 0, and this is our 0 over here. But if you can write anything you want inside of these curly brackets. If you write, for example, sphere, the something sphere has 1, you actually have to click on here and also call this sphere. So you have to call it the same. And now you can connect this get display name to this format text, and then you can connect this format text to the print string. So now it's going to say D, and the curly bracket sphere is actually this text. So it's the display name. So for example, it's going to say the medium sphere, and then has 1, okay? And this will print to the screen. Let's change this to a green color. Let's make it 10 so we can see it. And let's click on play. So if you click E and you hit it, it's going to say the small sphere has 1. So this is working. And what we want to do is we want to disable the input so you can't click anymore when you win the game. So let's disable the input. So disable input, and it's asking for a player controller. And here you can just write get player controller. So this is the player controller attached to this player. Let's compile and click save everything. Okay, let's click play and minimize this. And if I click E and it's 1, I actually can't press anymore because E is my up and down. If you can see it on your own keyboard, I can't click anymore. So the game has stopped. Okay, so let's go back, and we actually have to make it work on everything else. So we also have the R key and the T key. So in order to do this, instead of coming here and copy pasting this code and like doing this and connecting and stuff, this is bad practice. What we have learned in earlier lessons, you can actually collapse things to functions so you can make them more clean and access them easily. So what I want to do is the only thing that's going to vary in these other buttons, the R and T, is the spheres that we're referencing. So if we click on the medium sphere and let's reference it. So down here, this is for the medium sphere when we click R. And for the other one, it's the large sphere. So let's reference this one. So now we have references. So these are the only thing that will vary. This code over here will be the same. And so what we can do is, this one is an event, so we don't really need to collapse it because this is the same. So this one is going to be the same, and this is the only thing that's going to vary. Okay, so what we can do is right click on this and select the collapse to function. So now we have collapsed to a function, and let's call it move sphere. Call it something that makes sense, so we can that makes sense for us later on. Okay, so if I double click the function we just made, and I just move things down so it's a bit more organized. And you can see here it automatically creates input for us, and if we double click it, you can see here these inputs are connected. This is a bit double. We don't really need these two because this is actually the same. You can see here it's connected to both. We just need one of them. So what I'm going to do is click on this starting node, and I'm going to delete one of them. So I'm going to delete this bottom one, and I'm going to call this sphere, or just sphere actor is maybe a more specific name. So what I'm going to do is connect it here. So now this is the sphere actor. So over here, I'm going to click Alt and click here to disconnect it. So now it's more correct. This is the sphere actor that we have connected. Okay, and this is the add steps, which is this event that is called down here. So now what we can do is we can use this move sphere. So if I compile and save, and let's double click it, this is looking fine. Let's go down here, and what I can do is just drag out this move sphere, and I can connect it, and now I can connect this medium sphere to the sphere actor. Now this is the one, like down here, it's the medium sphere that is being connected to all of this. And down here, we can copy paste it, and this is going to move the large sphere instead. So this is very clean instead of copy pasting all of the code. If you want to make it more clean, it doesn't really matter, but you can write return node. So if you just write return, click on the add return node, this just looks more clean. It doesn't really add more to the code, but looks more clean, so it's fine. Let's go back to the event graph, and let's see what we're missing. So we need to add steps. So let's just add steps here so it adds to the total amount of steps. So we're calling this event every time we click. So let's click compile and save everything. And remember to click on these other spheres and tick the generate overlap events, else you won't really overlap this trigger box. Okay, so save everything and let's click play and test it out. So if I click E, I move this. If I click R, I move this sphere. And if I click T, I move this sphere. So you can see here it adds to the total amount of steps whenever I click. And if I, for example, want to win with the medium sphere, it says medium sphere has won, and I can't really click anymore because I have disabled the input. So this was a small and simple game, and if you want to see this trigger box inside the game, because you can see if I click play, it is invisible. You can click on this trigger box, go down here, and untick this actor hidden in-game. So now you can see it in-game. If you want to play, you can see the trigger box in front of you. So this is the example I wanted to show you, and it was a bit A bit more complex than what we usually did in the other lessons, but still very simple. And if you want, you can use the begin play event too and say, for example, the race has started. Go, go, go. Something like this, whatever you want. And so now when we start the race, it will say that the race has started and you should probably race now. Okay, so when we go back, what we did is we have this begin play. It prints this text out. And then we have these events, the E key, the R key, and the T key. So if I just place them up here so it's more organized for you. So we have the E key, the R key, and the T key. Okay, and when you press this key, something happens, and what happens is you move the sphere. And this is the collapsed function that we made. You can access it through here, or you can access it by double clicking here on the functions. You can see a tab opens up here, so you can switch between the event graph and the collapsed function. And inside this function, we have an input, and this input is the sphere actor that we have to insert depending on which actor it is. And this can also be made by just clicking on the plus here and searching for actor. So it's this actor, and you can even make other actors. So this is how this is made. This was made automatically, but now you can see how you make it manually. Okay, so this actor was made, and so we get the actor location. We break the vector, which is this one. We only want to move the x-axis. We make the vector again to make it back into a vector, and we add it as the new location for this sphere. Okay, so this is the move sphere, and then we add steps, and this is the event that we made here. This is calling the event, and every time we click on E, it will call this event, which will +1 on the steps taken, and it will print it to a screen, and if it's equal to 25, it will say stop playing the game or stop playing and start developing the game. And lastly, when you overlap with the goal or the trigger box, it will display a win message, and this win message has these curly brackets called sphere, which is this one over here. The sphere is the name that will show the display name, which then shows dynamically instead of us writing a static message. And you could have called it whatever you want. You could have called it candy, and remember to change this name to candy too. And this will work as well if you disconnect this, connect it to candy, and just right click and click refresh notes. So now it works as well. So it doesn't really matter what you call it, but just call it something that makes sense for you. And then we print this final text to the screen by print string, and we disable the input whenever the player has won. And another final thing, if you want to make more out of it, remember to comment your code. So here, for example, you can mark all of these, click on C, and click on E, R, and T events to move the spheres. I don't know, whatever you want. I don't want to make this video too long, but remember to comment all of your code. This is a good practice, and because for example, in 15 days, if you come back, you can't really remember what you've done, and this is very easy to just see the comments and see what you've finished. I hope this has been helpful to you, and if something is confusing or something you want to know more about, please let me know, and I will answer in the comments or inside of the Discord community server if you're in there, and I'll gladly help you out. It's awesome that you have made it so far. This is really, really great progress. So now we are going to go to more advanced stuff. For example, the arrays, and later on we will learn more about how to set up characters, how to use a player controller, and all of these things. So thank you for watching this lesson, and let's go over to the next one.